Another episode of Loud and Ugly Garage. We've got a bunch of motors in the way right now. We've got gassed out sitting over there on its frame finally. We got to move some stuff around the garage here to get this motor that I bought for Loud and Ugly all tore apart and set up on the bench so we can start assembling it. We've got some things that we've got to still learn and go through here to build this motor, but basically we just got the garage all set up, everything kind of out of the way. Nice clean workshop, and we're going to start taking these rod ends off and pulling the pistons out. Just want to mark everything so that you know how it all came out and where it came from. We got everything kind of stripped down and cleaned up. Good clean workshop for setting all the engine parts, and then we got some paper down so that we can write on there if we need to, just to make sure we've got everything in line and pull it exactly how we want to put it back together. Cleaned off the journals here, and we're going to get started with checking some clearances for the rod bearings.
So now that we've checked the crankshaft and we've got those measurements wrote down, we want to do the same thing over here and check the inside bore with the cap torqued down onto the rod to the right torque specs. These rods call for a 70 foot-pound torque with a 30 weight oil. So we're going to go ahead and get at that right now. Going to set up now our instruments here for measuring the inside of the bearing now that we've got it clamped into the rod here, and we've torqued it down to the specified settings that it says to do. We have our mic here in the vise. It's set at the dimension of the journal right now on the rod journal, and our dial bore gauge, we're going to set it up to that exact size, and we're going to zero the gauge right here. So the gauge zeroes out, so we know that's the exact size of our rod journal now, our dial bore gauge. So when we insert it into the piston, or into the rod I mean, and we read our gauge here, we read about 35 thousandths. These the specs for these engines call for anywhere from 3 to 35 thousandths for a race motor with aluminum rods. So we're within spec. We're a little on the loose end, but it's okay. We're going to be spinning the crap out of this thing.
got the bearing clearances checked for the rods. In the morning we're going to be checking the crank bearing clearance, and everything tonight turned out super good. This is our rod journal size, all the same across the board, and then the inside diameter after it's been torqued. This is our clearance for it, so everything checked out exactly the same, which is super good and a good place to start for a new motor. First step this morning, we're going to take the crank out to check the main journals. We've got the crank pulled out, all the journals cleaned up and put back on and torqued to the correct torque spec. Now we've got to check our inner diameter here and make sure that the clearance for the mains are good. So we're pulling about 25 thousandths clearance for our main bearings, which is what we want for this race motor application. We're setting the dial bore gauge up to check the bore on the block. We got all of our clearance checked in this episode so that we can start the assembly and cleaning of this motor so that we can start heading in the right direction. We got the bore size checked, the main bearing checked, and the rod bearing checked. So we're going to be slapping the cam in for next episode, and then we're going to be checking piston to valve clearance so that I can get some head gaskets ordered and get the top end of this motor put together so that we can put it in the truck and take it down the street.